Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join this webinar. I promise it will be educational. Again, my name is Julian Belilti. I'm from Honeydew Energy Advisors along with David Lungard. And we're essentially energy consultants in the DMV region that help condos and co-ops comply with energy regulations like benchmarking and building energy performance standards. And we also help buildings when it comes to bidding out certain projects for energy efficiency, renewable energy, roofing, all that type of stuff. Um, to get started real quick, we are going to go over the agenda. We are starting with Montgomery County benchmarking and BEPS program, going over that. Some of you may already know about it, but others may not. Then the new state of Maryland's benchmarking and BEPS, which really all falls under the BEPS program. Then we're going to go into some legislative updates from the new state of Maryland BEPS program and recommendations that we have. Then we're going to pass it on to Adam Herzer, who's going to go over the Empower Maryland Tune-Up Incentive Program, where not only can it cover an energy audit and qualified projects, but it can also cover your first year's benchmarking fee in Maryland. And then we're going to finish it off with Frank Murray, who's going to go over the big, beautiful bill and how it's going to affect the solar investment tax credit and potentially affect your ability to go solar through power purchase agreements and roof leases. And then we're going to finish off with the questions and answers. So to get started, we've got Montgomery County benchmarking overview. So first, what is benchmarking? Benchmarking is essentially scoring your building's efficiency compared to other buildings in the area. And there are different scores and metrics that come out of that. The metric that's important for Montgomery County on the right side is weather normalized site EUI. And site EUI by itself is essentially your energy usage divided by the total square foot of the building. So it's energy usage per square foot. And then with the weather normalized part, it's essentially adjusted to a current year's weather patterns. The higher the score, the less efficient you are. The lower the score, the more efficient you are. So you want to have a low site EUI. Now we're going to focus on the table that is in the center, or center left. And there's two groups here. The first group is any building that's above 250,000 square feet. The second group is below 250,000 square feet, but above 25,000 square feet. For group one, they've had a benchmark since June 1st, 2023 on an annual basis, with the verification required that same year in 2023. For group two, they've had a benchmark since last year, June 1st, 2024. They've had a benchmark again this year and have to continue benchmarking annually. Their verification was also the same year they had to start benchmarking last year. And verifications aren't required for another 3 years. So for the group one, they have to verify again in 2026, so next year. And then group two doesn't have to verify until 2027. Now, for penalties, if you do not comply with benchmarking, there is a $500 initial offense fee, and then $750 for repeat offenses. Now, when it comes to BEPS, which is the second part of benchmarking, right? So you score your building, then there's a standard that you need to meet by a certain deadline or deadlines. And for Montgomery County, again, the metric is the weather normalized site EUI. A good thing here, unlike DC with the site EUI metric there, if you have solar on your roof, whether it's net metered where you're using the solar energy and saving, or it's community solar and it's being sent out to the grid, you can still benefit, solar can still benefit your score on a 1-to-1 kilowatt hour ratio So it's a big plus for Montgomery County, especially compared to DC. Now, all buildings on the covered building list are required to benchmark and are required to comply with BEPS. So for multifamily buildings, the threshold, the standard target score to meet is a 37, right? So if you currently fall below a 37, which means you're efficient, you are still required to maintain that score below, which we'll discuss a little further. Now, there are two BEPS deadlines. There's an interim standard deadline, then there's a final deadline, which we're going to get to in the following slides. So first, you have to come up with a baseline before we get into these deadlines. And how do you figure out your baseline? So for group one, above 250,000 square feet, you have to take the average of your two highest site EUI scores between 2022 and 24, right? Between those 3 years. For group two, the period where you have to take the two highest scores is 2023 to 2025. Now, you don't have to do this yourself. I believe group one has already received their baseline score from DEP, and group two should receive theirs next year. But it's still good to double check and make sure that it's accurate. Now, with the interim deadline for group one, that will be December 31st, 2030. And we will go over what the score is that you need to meet at that time. For group two, the interim deadline is 2031. So they're just a year apart. Then for the final, it's 5 years after that. So 2035 for group one, and then 2036 for group two. Now, we know what the final standard score is, 37 for multifamily buildings. You'll know what your baseline is either this year or next year, depending on the group you're in. How do you know the interim score? It's essentially right in the middle between your baseline and your final score. So if your baseline score, for example, is a 57, you will need to meet a 47 for your interim deadline, so 2030 or 2031, depending what group you're in, and then a final standard of 37 by 2035 or 2036. Now, if your score is below a 37, you are still required to keep your score below or at a 37 during the interim and the final deadline. So if you're already efficient, you got to maintain that efficiency. And sometimes you may need to implement one project to make sure that you will never fall above a 37, especially during those two periods. And now I'm going to pass it over to David to go over the state of Maryland's program.
All right. Thank you, Julian. Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you to everybody joining. And as usual, thank you to CAI for giving us such a great platform here. But now transitioning from looking at Montgomery County's program into looking at Maryland State's benchmarking program. So as many of you probably know at this point, Maryland State's benchmarking program requires building owners to submit reports for the very first time by September 1st of this year. So in just over a month from now. So this is for all buildings in the state over 35,000 square feet. And this is just going to be one big threshold. So this isn't set to expand at any point in the future. So this is different from the tiered building size thresholds that we see in Washington, D.C. with their BEPS program, or Montgomery County, where 1 year buildings over 50,000 square feet have to benchmark. Then in later years, buildings over 25K and then 10K need to benchmark. So as of now, if you're a building under 35K square feet, you're safe from the program as a whole. So as far as the actual benchmarking itself, it's no different than in any other jurisdiction. It's the same as how Julian was describing it. So building details, historical usage data, they're input into the same platform, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and the reports are due annually until the end of the legislation, which for MDE's case is 2040. A key difference in the Maryland State program from the Montgomery County program is that the metric that determines compliance is direct greenhouse gas emissions intensity, not weather normalized site UI. So two completely different metrics there. And direct greenhouse gas emissions intensity is a measurement of a building's carbon dioxide emissions produced per square foot. And that kg CO2e per square foot you see on the right side of the screen is the exact metric that's displayed in ESPM. Of course, we don't want to get that confused, especially since there are some very similar metrics in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. As for penalties, which we see on the top, they can be levied by the state on a case-by-case basis. Having a non-compliance mark can garner fines, make it hard to get financing for things, and can create other complications. So, of course, we really want to just get the reports completed and submitted year over year and avoid any of that at all. But last thing for this slide, verifications are due next year in 2026. This is verifying calendar year 2025 data and verifying the square footage of the building, which is very important. So definitely be planning for that expense next year. Then you're not going to need to worry about it again for 5 years. It's important to note that for the verifications, your building is going to need to hire a qualified third party. This is not like benchmarking in Maryland State where the building itself can do the report in-house without a contractor. You're going to need to look outward for that service. But the main thing for this slide, buildings over 35K square feet, whether or not you're on the current version of the Maryland Covered Building List, you're going to be required to submit a benchmarking report by September 1st. And of course, we're happy to help out if anybody still needs guidance in that regard. All right. Now looking at Maryland State's actual Building Energy Performance Standards program, the state's BEPS program comes from the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. And the idea here is that the BEPS program is a vehicle for Maryland to meet net zero carbon emissions by 2040. There are 3 big distinctions between this program and Montgomery counties. The first is obviously the key metric being direct greenhouse gas emissions, not site EUI, which we talked about. The second is, unfortunately, as the legislation is currently written, renewables such as on-site solar don't factor into your compliance in any way, which stinks, of course. We'll talk about that more later, though. The third major difference is that all covered buildings will need to meet the standards that are set by MDE every single year. So this isn't like in Montgomery County where the covered buildings are only checked for compliance twice at the interim and final standard deadlines. Looking at the actual compliance deadlines / timelines and what the standards are, the first set of standards for all building types occurs from 2030 to 2034. Within this time frame, multifamily buildings will need to be at or below a direct GHG emissions intensity of 0.82 each one of those individual years. Then this standard gets cut in half for the years between 2035 and 2039, where multifamily buildings are going to need to drop their direct GHG emissions per square foot to 0.41. Then the final standard is 0 for years 2040 and beyond. Now, looking at the last bullet, there are penalties associated with missing the required standard each year. So for each metric ton of direct CO2 emissions that your building produces over that given year standard, buildings are going to be on the hook for $230 per. In the next couple slides, we'll look at a specific example just so you guys get a feel for what these penalties could look like. Okay, so right here is the parameters for our example, and these are not just made up numbers. This comes from a benchmarking report for a Maryland State building we benchmark currently. We're looking at a roughly 160,000 square foot building that produced 32.9% more emissions than the standard for 2030. Now, on this slide, we show the whole calculus for how to get to the penalty amount for that year. I'm not going to go through each one of those things and bore you guys with that, but the important thing to note is that a building that is 160K square feet that missed the target by roughly 33% is going to owe a fine of nearly $10,000. That's not a huge fine, especially when you're comparing it to the monstrous, massive DC fines. But remember, these fines can be levied each year, not just at the end of a 5-year period or the end of a compliance cycle. So of course, that can add up and that needs to be taken seriously, especially in the years where the standard gets cut in half between 2034 and 2035, because that can really skyrocket what your fine looks like. So got to keep that in mind, even though we're still years away from it, just being proactive and getting prepared. And And now I want to share with you guys some legislative updates that impact both the Montgomery County program and the Maryland State program. And of course, here at Honeydew, we pride ourselves with keeping our finger on the pulse and bringing you guys the updates as soon as we hear about them. So first thing, MDE, the Maryland Department of the Environment, has mentioned that they're going to be looking to alter their program to better align with Montgomery County's BEPS program. Now, what would this look like? First thing, not just using direct GHG emissions intensity as a compliance metric, but also adding in site EUI. Now, this would be excellent because GHG emissions only factors in changes in gas usage. Site EUI, on the other hand, considers total gas and total electric usage. So this would not only add another compliance option to make the program more flexible, but it also, at least in our opinion, better rewards efficiency and not just electrification. The second thing they're looking to change, allowing on-site renewables. So allowing renewables to factor in, just like in Montgomery County, as Julian mentioned. So obviously this would be great if your on-site solar, which Frank is going to get into later, if that could be factored in as a credit towards your compliance. Obviously that would be great. But for now, we're using direct greenhouse gas emissions as the metric. If this changes in any way between now and 2030, then of course we're going to update you all. MDE has actually noted 2027 specifically as the year where they may be looking to implement these changes. So we will keep our eyes peeled there. And then next update to touch on regarding the Maryland State benchmarking program. And this one is brand new as of literally a few weeks ago. Originally, associations with multiple buildings below 35K square feet would need to be grouped together and benchmarked if, one, they were sharing meters or central equipment, or two, if the buildings were all governed by a single board. Now, the latter here, that second point, is what's changed. Now, MDE is saying that buildings that are under 35K square feet and are governed by a single board are very likely not going to need to benchmark or comply with BEPS. So great news for these buildings. MDE has not come out and officially made this law, but they've been advising individual buildings that we work with that they're not going to need to benchmark this year. But of course, again, keeping our eyes peeled and our finger on the pulse, and we'll see exactly when this becomes law. This really has a dramatic effect on garden style properties. But the last thing for this slide, the very last bullet there, double reporting. Originally, if you were a building in Montgomery County that was above 35,000 square feet, you were required to comply with both Montgomery County benchmarking and BEPS and Maryland State benchmarking and BEPS at the same time, which is completely ridiculous, obviously, especially because they're using different metrics and it's just very overly complicated. Luckily, House Bill 49, which got passed in the spring, eliminates this. The catch is House Bill 49 is scheduled to actually get put into law on October 1st, which is 1 month after the Maryland State benchmarking deadline. This naturally poses the question, if I'm one of these Montgomery County buildings that overlaps with Maryland State BEPS, should I just wait a month until this legislation gets enacted and not worry about also submitting a report to Maryland State? That's definitely a reasonable question. However, we've asked MDE about this, and we've been told explicitly as of now that buildings will still need to dual report for this year. So for all of our clients, we're abiding by this guidance, but we definitely expect MDE to add more clarity for this and to honestly provide a clear exemption for MoCo buildings before the September 1st deadline. So that's another thing we'll be sure to keep you guys posted on each and every one of these updates. But from here, I will pass it off to Adam to talk about the Empower Maryland program.
And real quick, before we get into the tune-up incentive program, back to the garden style associations. So what we've noticed actually is that out of the entire covered building list for multifamily buildings, I'd say about the majority of them are garden style. Now, if you're garden style, it doesn't mean that you're automatically exempt now based on the new rules. If you're a garden style complex and any of the buildings on campus or any of the buildings attached to each other are above 35,000 square feet, and or you are sharing a meter or any central equipment between any of these buildings, where we would have to combine those building square footage. And if that's above 35,000 square feet, then you are still required to benchmark. Also, if you are on the covered building list, it is still your responsibility to exempt your building through the application process. So if anybody has any questions, wondering if they are on the covered building list right now and they need to remove themselves, or if they don't even know if they have to benchmark based on the configuration of the complex, feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to let you know if you're on the covered building list and whether or not you should have to benchmark. But now on to Adam.
Hello, everybody. I'm Adam from HBS Solutions, and with our company, we like to, and we actually go through utility programs and the Empower Maryland Fund, which is everybody gets billed. It's on their utility bills every month, and we go out to buildings and do turnkey solutions. We do an audit, and then we do low-cost measures. And we can also do larger measures or capital intensive measures, but that would be at a cost. Anyways, typical measures that we do are control systems calibration or repair. We do sequence of operations, their modifications. We do small capital building retrofits, just like just as simple as putting in VFDs or something like that. We clean up and tune up HVAC units to make them run more efficiently. And we do some logic implementation of set points and resets. So basically, this will be a no-cost service to you. And basically, what we go in there is tune up your system to run better. Next slide. So the tune-up application process is we'll go through the application phase, and we'll get you to sign off on the terms and conditions, and we'll require the bills, and we'll start a utility analysis. Then we'll start our application on the portal, and again we'll go through the T's and C's with you, and we'll submit the application there. And lastly, after we get an authorization from the client, we go through and we submit it to the utility program, and we'll go through a whole scope of work call, and then we'll actually implement what you agree to on the scope of work call to complete the project, and then we'll implement it directly afterwards. Next slide. So the study phases, we go out there and we go through and we look at everything, and we identify ECMs through, identification through the walkthrough and a standard ASHRAE level audit, and we look through everything to get there. Initially, after that, we go and we do the report to ICF. They are the engineers that actually look over our work and make sure it's okay and approve it. I can't see the left side of the, but then we update it once the approval goes through. If there are any comments, and we'll go through the program. Next slide. Then we'll set up the pre-trend data and do measurements. Then we'll implement the ECMs and the turnkey solutions. We'll verify the ECM implementation, collect the analysis and post-trend data, do the documented savings achievements, and the utility inspection and closeout. Next slide. So here's a case study that we did in the past. Here in the center slide, we show what it would cost initially for a person that did it outside of the program, but it'd be no cost to you guys, basically. And in the bottom, this is what we actually submit to like ICF, what the payback period is, and you'll see that they're very quick and good payback periods for just doing simple, like a tune up of the RTU and AHU, and so on and so forth.
And just to clarify, before we get to the next slide, could you explain to everybody, was there an actual cost for the building for all these improvements and audits and all that type of stuff?
There was no cost.
Uh-huh.
We pull all that information or all that funding from Empower Maryland.
Okay, so technically there was a 0-year payback, but because the program requires it, you had to put some sort of payback period on there.
Yeah, so it's part of like a standard audit that you show how much it would cost to implement it and everything else. And we personally get paid through how well we can improve the system. So if we have, it's the amount of kilowatt hours saved in a single year.
Good to know.
And this is also another metric. Just I don't want to go through everything here. It basically it shows, like we have reductions of everything from a 10% reduction and so on and so forth. So you can see that it's no cost to you, but you can just see how efficient you can go through there. For this slide, I think this goes for everybody. These are all the utilities we work through. I would say the same thing for the solar. But anyways, go ahead and go for it.
So now we're on to Frank. So before we get to Frank real quick, just a quick summary. So the Empower Maryland Tune-Up Program is actually something that's offered by your utilities, kind of forced by Maryland to do so. And if you look on your bill in Maryland, your electric bill, you will see a line item on there called Empower Maryland. And that is essentially what is funding these programs. So since everybody who lives in Maryland is paying for it, you might as well take advantage of the free audit, free improvements, and this will also cover your first year benchmarking fee as well. Now on to Frank.
Thank you. Frank Murray with Skyview Ventures and Davis Hill Development. What we do is we specialize in clean energy systems and environmental attributes. A lot of that does focus on solar. Specifically, I manage the Mid-Atlantic region. Most of our projects that I've managed specifically are in DC and in the Maryland. We own and operate about 75 to 80 systems. I personally built about 25 to 30 of those systems in the last several years. So we're very, very in tune to the Maryland market and what's occurring. What recently happened about 3 weeks ago, and I'm sure you heard in the news, is the one big beautiful bill. What does that really mean? From an outside perspective, many people don't understand what the changes are and how that really affects the solar industry and your availability for solar in the future. So when he signed that bill into act 3 weeks ago, what that really did is it changed what occurred under the Inflation Reduction Act back in 2022. What they signed in 2022 allowed for a 5 to 7 year period to phase out the tax incentives. That phase out gave a lot of certainty, a lot of clarity, a lot of understanding. Hey, if we want to build a solar project, what's going to happen? How will the economics work? What are the benefits? Very, very clear timeline. You have decisions to make, improvements or what you need to do to actually implement a clean energy system. Under the new law, what changed is that they wanted to reduce those incentives. They're phasing them out a lot faster than originally intended. They're intended for probably 2030 through 2033. That's really making these incentives be reduced by very, very short timeline, and there's some requirements that you're going to have to be put in place to meet those timelines. What that really does is it creates a lot of challenges and a lot of misunderstanding of what might occur in the solar industry. And if you're trying to build a system or try to own and operate a system, it makes it very, very difficult to plan further out. So you have to make decisions a little bit sooner than originally intended. We also anticipate, because a lot of energy costs are on the rise. You've already seen that probably in the greater Maryland. We've noticed that there's been 20, maybe 30% increases, just checking the tariffs. We project those to actually increase because a lot of the new generation that's coming online has historically been solar or renewable energy projects. This kind of creates a lot of uncertainty from those developers to proceed with those projects and or invest in new projects in the future, not knowing the political environment. So we really want to dive into a little bit just to make sure you understand, what impacts does this bill have, on your future assumptions and the way you might consider or would like to consider moving solar in the future. So, Julian, next slide. The big component of the One Big Beautiful Bill and the way we really value solar projects is the ITC value. And what that allowed is, from a standpoint, you build a solar project and you can get a 30% tax credit back on that project. So it depends if you want to own it, third-party ownership. You know that there's value for that incentive for building that project. As a developer and or owner of a system in the future, that's a very, very sizable value. We said that if you had $1 million project, you'd be losing about $300,000 in value for the project. So how does that really translate is, it makes the price of the ownership of the system from third party and your internal ownership go up by that value because you're no longer able to receive that tax credit. So within the provisions of that bill, they have defined that they want the project to be in construction by July 5th, 2026. So it's a very, very, very short timeline. What does construction mean? I'll dive into that a little bit more in the next slide, but it means we have to start evaluating a project today. We have to understand what you want to do with that project and how that project will proceed. To be in construction of the project just doesn't mean that, hey, we signed a contract and we're in construction. It's a timeline, and these solar systems take a lot of approvals to get to where they need to be. So it's really accelerating the timeline of, hey, we need to make a decision. If you are unable to kind of have a project under construction by next year, you can still get the tax credit, but you have to have it in service by the end of 2027. That gives a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of challenges. You have to get permit approvals, utility approvals, and many times they're out of our control, right? So from a standpoint, are you really willing to risk a project or the economics of a project based on utility factors? So for us, and many of you, really do not want to lose out on that value because it's a very, very significant understanding and or benefits the project to proceed with a renewable energy project. Next slide. So we really just want to define the safe harbor, right? So to make sure that you're able to get that 30% ITC, we really didn't make sure that it's able to safe harbor that or have the project under construction. Now, right after he signed the Big Beautiful Bill, he sent out another executive order where they're going to clarify the beginning of construction. What does that mean? The guidance will be out in the end of August. Our assumption is that you might have to have some material on site. You might actually have to have procured some equipment. You've had to make some investment to the project. We still don't know fully, but we'll have clarity by late August, and we'll definitely share that with you once we have the information. So from the standpoint to actually make an investment or proceed with a project, it does take 6 to 7 months sometimes to even understand what a project is. Is it even feasible? Does the utility even allow you? Will permits allow you? There's a lot of work that we have to do. Next slide. So really, what do we want to make sure that we're working towards? We really want you, building owners, or if you're looking for third-party ownership, to really start having discussions by the end of September. What that allows us to do is that we need to evaluate your roof, the economics of the project. We want to make sure we have the discussions with you. Beyond that period of time, it does take time to get through contracts. It does take time to do a site walks, analysis, a lot of other preliminary requirements for any type of renewable energy project need to be done in advance. If we wait till a month before, there's going to be a very, very long backlog. So early conversations allow us to plan and also make sure that you're on the same page. We do want something kind of established by the end of the year, right? If the timeline saying, hey, we have to have some detail by July, there's a little bit of a giveaway after that. But we want to make sure that we or you, whoever might be involved as stakeholders, can be on the same page and know that the project's moving in the right direction. We have projects that are currently with PEPCO that are taking 6 or 7 months for approval for various reasons. So it's out of our control, and we want to make sure that we don't get locked into a situation where the economics aren't there that were promised. So the impacts will still need to be evaluated, and we hopefully have some guidance on that. But it's not a time to sit around and wait. I know it is sometimes can be fearful of not knowing what the future is, but the administration has made it very, very clear that they're not in favor of renewable energy at this time. Things could change, but we have to take what's actually available to us at this point in time. Next slide. So the economic impacts. We as an organization, we offer a lot of site leases, power purchase agreements, and you can even have the ownership. When we evaluate a lot of projects in the Maryland, DC region, we're saying that, hey, your savings based on these values, you could lose up to 75%. We're also saying that some of these sites might not even be possible for an economic value moving forward. A lot in Maryland, the costs based on what the revenue is, it might not really be economical for third-party ownership at this time based on current rates. So we want to make sure that if you do have some compliance or you are looking for some savings or value, that you're taking advantage of that today. If you're unable to make those decisions today, you are going to be subject to the future rate increases, and you have no control over what the utility is going to set, right? So by implementing a renewable energy project, you have a way to hedge your utility costs for the next 20 years and not subject to this continuous rate increases that are occurring and that we are seeing across utilities across the U.S. Next slide. One of those deal structures that we do like to offer, and it's one of our core deal structures, it's what's called a power purchase agreement. As a developer, we're going to own the system. There's other partners you can have. You're only going to receive the energy that comes off the building. There's no cost to you. Whatever's generated from the system, then we would be billing you for that specifically, that cost of the energy at a set rate. DC and Maryland have different values, but we definitely love to be able to run those economics for you based on your building. There's no set value. Every building's different based on size, location, and other economic requirements that come through. I know Julian evaluates many of our systems, and they're a great partner for bringing that together. So as a third-party advisor, we definitely recommend you reaching out to them to kind of help facilitate that process. But that is one of our core options that, hey, we put up there. There's no out-of-pocket for you. We sell you the electric, and in return, you just pay for a set rate of that electric. And most of the times in DC, that is very significantly below the value that you're paying the utility. Next slide. If your building does not have the availability for usage on site to absorb it, we do offer what's called a roof lease. We can actually put the site on your building and or sometimes even in fields or other locations. What we do is that the source is actually generated. We sell that electric to the grid. It then goes back to community solar subscribers and we're paid. So we're actually able to offer you a roof lease, and it's kind of the cycle that if your building doesn't have a lot of high usage or any usage at all, we can still utilize that space and give you a roof value of what that is. That lease value will determine based on the system size and location of the system. But you can also be community solar subscribers to help hedge those costs as well to the projects that we're building, owning, and operating. Next slide. Did want to give a little bit of a timeline just to kind of say, hey, look into the future. What does it look like? We're saying that, hey, we really want to make decisions this year. We want to get things signed up. We want to make sure that you have a way to hedge your utility costs in the future or value. If you're not signed up or things aren't moving by 2026, we don't know what the economics are going to look like after that point in time. And then from a development standpoint, it's very hard for us to make long-term investments without knowing what the value would look like. If you do start in late 2027, we do have to have it online by the end of that year, which would be very, very challenging to have the ITC. So many of the projects at that point will have to model without having an additional incentive. But if you do start early and there's delays, we are starting before that July 3rd of next year. We do have several years to put that into service, which then gives you the timeline and security that, hey, these economics are going to stay the same and you don't have to worry or any concerns. Next slide. There we go.
Thank you, Frank. So great. We are at the end of the presentation. Just quick final reminders. When it comes to benchmarking, very, very important. The state of Maryland, if you are in Maryland and you don't know the size of your building or you don't know if you're on a covered building list, feel free to reach out to us. But the deadline to submit your benchmarking report to the state of Maryland is September 1st. So we're around a month away from the deadline. Then for DC, and I know this is Maryland specific, but just in case there are any managers here that also manage buildings in DC, next year for buildings between 10,000 and 25,000 square feet, it is their first time that they are required to benchmark. So by that time, all DC groups will be required to benchmark. This is the final group of 10,000 square feet and above. And that will be by May 1st next year. For the tune-up incentive program that Adam was presenting earlier, again, 100% coverage if you qualify of your first year's benchmarking reporting fee. The energy audit, which just so you guys know, we've seen energy audits that go past $20,000. They usually range between $10,000 to $20,000. So that's a great value to have. And then it'll cover fully eligible upgrades, and those that are not eligible, you can probably still receive some great incentives for, like up to 70% covered. Something that HBS is very well aware of, and they can inform you further about. And then what Frank was just discussing earlier about the big, beautiful bill, and how that will remove the 30% tax credit very soon. The deadline to sign contracts, if you're looking into PPA or a roof lease, is December 2025. And to be safe, start reviewing those contracts by the end of September, so that you have enough time. We've seen it take up to 3 to 4 months to review and finalize a contract with associations. With all that said, we're now going to answer some questions. I believe we're going to start with those in the chat. And as you guys can see, there you'll have all of our contact info, myself, David, Adam, and Frank on there. So if you have any specific questions about what we discussed, feel free to reach out to us. But I will start with the first questions. What does the state reporting in 2025 consist of for a large high rise? I see that David answered that, but essentially you're reporting your building characteristics. So the size of your building, the number of units you have in the building, number of bedrooms, percent heated and cooled, number of washer and dryers you have in the building, so on and so forth. Then you upload the previous year's energy data each year. And so you're essentially benchmarking the previous year. So this year we're benchmarking for 2024. Next year we'll benchmark for 2025 because we have an entire year of data. So hopefully that answered it along with David's response. This one's for Adam. Which utilities with PEPCO and BG&E? And I think Adam may have answered that question already, but I'll let him answer it again.
Yeah, so utilities are BG&E, Delmarva, PEPCO, and SMECO in Maryland, but we also do more.
Great. Thank you for that. And hopefully that answered your question, Karen. Now on to Elizabeth. We have for properties in Montgomery County, you can also get funds from Green Bank. That is very true. And cover your first year verification and benchmarking fee. And I believe she shared a link to the MDE Maryland program. So thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate that. Tune-up. So Rich is asking if the tune-up will allow for gas savings.
So through Washington Gas, there's a program, yes, and also BG.
BG&E. Okay, cool. So hopefully that answers your question, Rich. And yes, slides will be shared by CAI after this. So you will have all that information. And again, feel free to send us an email, give us a call. All of us are informed about this topic, so we can definitely answer those questions. Yes, we have won awards from PEPCO and Washington Gas for doing just that. Great. Awesome. From TRC Engineering, Elizabeth, thank you for that. Are there any additional questions? I don't know if there was a Q&A section where people may have added some, but if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up.
Yeah, I have a question. I am with a condo association in Montgomery County, and we are an older building built in '72. we don't have the electrical infrastructure to really go full electric. I mean, maybe if we're forced to in the future, we are taking as many steps as possible. We're getting new boilers this year, actually. They're going to be gas, but they're going to be more efficient. And we're replacing our HVAC system and things of that nature, recommissioning the chillers to get them more efficient. My question is, has there been any talk of grandfathering in older buildings who just simply have to use a specific amount of gas? I don't know what that amount is, or, you know, ideally we would be below the threshold even if we have to use some gas, but could you answer that or speak on it?
Luckily you're in Montgomery County. So according to how the laws are written now, especially based on the HB 49 bill, I believe, you are not required to comply with Maryland's requirements. So it's the state of Maryland that is currently essentially requiring electrification, which could change. They may add the site EUI, just like Montgomery County has. But for Montgomery County, it's based on your building's efficiency. So as long as you have efficient equipment that is gas powered, like you've mentioned, you're switching to a new boiler, which I'm assuming would be gas powered, then you should be fine as long as you reach the interim standard score, which is between your baseline and a 37, and then meet the 37 score by the final deadline, then you should be good. Is your building above or below 250,000 square feet? If you don't mind me asking.
It's above, although I think it's like 300,000 and maybe another 100 for the garage levels, which I don't think count. I'm not sure.
Okay, so you should have already received an email from DEP regarding your baseline score. So once you have that, find that middle point between that score, if it's not below 37, and the 37, and then that would be the interim deadline you would need to meet by 2030. So all the projects you're currently working on, we'd recommend implementing them before, I believe, 2029, so that for 2030, you're realizing all the savings from these new projects. They will be counted towards your new score at that time, which will then be evaluated for the interim deadline.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Of course.
One thing I'll share about Montgomery County BEPS is the DEP also offers a BPIP, a Building Performance Improvement Plan. So if you feel that your building, because of the infrastructure, like you're saying, is going to have difficulty reasonably reaching the requirements, then you can make an application to DEP for a Building Performance Improvement Plan and work collaboratively with them. So that's another option. Like Julian said, I mean, getting your baseline first and then assessing, you know, how hard it's going to be to reach that interim standard is going to be step one, but the BPIP is available.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Any other questions?
There's a few more in the chat.
Oh, there are? You want to read them off?
Yeah. Another question from Rich. Thank you, Rich. Our buildings are shaded. Review the offsite solar discussion, please. Rich, were you asking us to review, maybe have Frank go back over the solar options?
Yes, that's what I have in mind. In other words, what about offsite solar? How does that fit in? I'm also typing another one in just to cue this up, and that is if we're using gas appliances as we are now of course, we may not even be covered by this. So, and I believe David understands what our situation is because I've been in touch with him extensively. You know, so this whole program probably won't affect us unless they go well below 35,000, or unless they change their mind again and decide that condominium associations with more than one building, you get the sum of the building area. Right now, they're giving us some relief from that. But I'm curious how we could possibly reach zero CO2 emissions if, retaining gas appliances.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we did a lot of testing on that on the Energy Star Portfolio Manager program, even reducing the electricity down to zero, and it didn't change the greenhouse gas emissions metric, the score, as long as we kept gas at the same level. So it's really going to come down to electrification. However, back to your first question, for off-site solar, there's a program, back to the community solar, where you are the off-taker, not the host of the solar system. So you are actually able to subscribe to the solar energy produced from a community solar system located elsewhere on another building or on a field. And you will receive, either you or the building, whoever subscribes, would receive essentially a 10% discount throughout the year on your electric bill. So the benefit there is reducing your energy usage by 10%, and then that you are using solar energy. However, when it comes to benchmarking and BEPS, it unfortunately, as of now, does not affect your score if you are subscribing to solar energy rather than being the host of a solar energy system where you're producing it and sending it out to the grid. So hopefully that answers your question, but if you'd like, David can always provide you on the side more information about community solar and how to subscribe to it.
That answers the questions. Thanks so much. I appreciate the presentation as well.
Thank you, Rich. We have another, we have Justin Garcia, do single family home townhouse communities. Oh, sorry, that just went back down. Need to abide by this or only condo buildings? That is a great question, Justin. We actually had to look into this and ask MDE a few times just to confirm. So essentially that would be like an HOA, right? With individual homes or townhomes in a community. And they are not required to benchmark. We haven't really seen any on the covered building list, but if you think you are, and you know you shouldn't be, which you really shouldn't be unless you have a single building on the property outside of the homes or the townhomes that are above 35,000 square feet, then reach out to us and we'll help remove you from the list, but you shouldn't be on the list if that's the case, Justin. Andres, could you please share a link to the site EUI requirements for MoCo? Thank you for doing so, David. So if anybody needs to see that, it's on the chat. Will the slides be available to us? Yep, Rich, they will be. We're going to be sending those out shortly after the presentation, along with a recording. Any other final questions?
Julian, I do have a comment since we're looking past 2030 and beyond into 2040. For the tune-up program, every 3 years you can redo it.
Every how many years?
3.
3. Okay, I thought you said 30. I was like, oh, glad it's 3. That's good to know. So if anybody has done it in the past, how long has the tune-up program been available, Adam?
It's almost 8 years now.
8 years. Okay, so if anybody's done it in the past and it's been over 3 years or 3 years ago, you can still do it all over again. And I'm assuming if they got an energy audit, you would just do another energy audit.
Correct. We would just do the whole thing again, and we probably improve on the ECMs and stuff like that.
Wow. So it's kind of like a reserve study. You could get one every 3 years in Maryland at no additional cost, but obviously it's more associated with energy usage in the building rather than all the different components, but still not bad to get an energy audit every 3 years to understand what improvements you can make. And then as you make those, seeing what additional improvements you can make when you get new equipment and aging equipment, all that type of stuff.
Or if the laws change, then you want to have another one, reevaluate where your position is for BEPS and so on and so forth.
Very good point. Thank you for that, Adam, and thank you for that comment. So again, if you guys have any questions after, you have contact information, so feel free to reach out to us individually. We love answering questions. We love educating. As you can see, we're always on these webinars. You always see our faces. Hopefully you're not sick of us. But yeah, very, it was a pleasure presenting to you all. I want to thank the panel, David, Adam, and Frank, for all joining us and taking the time to present and educate everyone. And I want to thank the attendees for taking your time during lunch. I know we're a little over. Everybody needs to get back to work. So thank you again, and I hope to see you all soon.